Hello, Crack Attack here, and today we're going to do something a lot of you have been asking for me to do on stream and off, which is a nice Season 12 Dota Autochess composition tier list. So, in terms of weighing the relative strength of each composition, I assume that for all of these compositions you've already hit the base units required, which I think is a fair assumption, given proper reroll strategy, the dismiss feature, and the addition of relics, which all aid in finding certain units reliably. So in the end, it all comes down to how strong the composition is and how it fares against others in the current meta, i.e. how often it is seen in a top 4 position, and how item dependent the composition is, as for instance, running an assassin composition without damage items is completely worthless and is bottom 4 material. So, without stalling any further, let's get right into the tier list. Just as a disclaimer, when I place each of the compositions into its respective tier, they're not in any order in particular. If something's in A tier, it's equally A tier amongst all the other compositions. I guess technically there is quite a little bit of strength difference, but I'm not going to go into that detail, so it doesn't matter whereabouts in A tier it is. If it's A tier, it's A tier, regardless of if it's left or right. It's not stronger or weaker. That's not what's intended. Alright, so first up, we got Meepo Ikea. I think it's a bit of a no-brainer where this one goes in terms of tier list. Definitely top half, but whereabouts, in my opinion. I think Meepo Ikea is a nice A+. So why is Meepo Ikea A+? So, Meepo Ikea, very, very strong composition right now. Very, very prominent in the meta. When you hit that Meepo 3 SF3, oh, that power spike is enormous, and usually you hit that around round 20 to 25. At that point, you'll be able to quite comfortably build a win streak, as well as deal about 20 damage to enemies per turn if they're not prepared. Not only that, Meepo Ikea, when you hit Meepo 3, plus Manta Style in particular, that's almost a guaranteed top 4, and is essentially a composition I almost see every single game. So, that being said, I think Meepo Ikea deserves a spot in A+. The reason why it's not S is, well, I'll explain later as well, but usually most of the other S class compositions will outdo it, but due to consistency, not being too reliant on items, and having extremely large power spikes with win potential, Meepo Ikea goes in A+. Alright, next up, Demon 3 Elf. So, by Demon 3 Elf, I mean the TB3, Terrorblade 3 with Treant, Fury and Anti-Mage, Shadow Fiend and Venomancer. That variant, level 7 power spike. Also seeing a bit more play recently in the meta from my experience. And not only that, when people hit their Terrorblade 3s in decent time, by decent time I mean before round 25, almost always has a good showing and hits top 4 as long as their health wasn't too scuffed in the first place. Only downside is it is a little item reliant, as you need damage items on TB to make sure it carries, as well as some sort of mana item, like especially Blink Dagger, to get into the backlines to make sure it transforms before Lions and Dooms and whatever else CCs it out. So on that note, it's strong, slightly item reliant, but that being said, I think it deserves a spot in A overall due to its consistency in top 4 when you hit the units, and moderate item reliance that prevents it from being any higher than that. So next up, a bit of a niche composition, but we got 4 gods, 6 mage, legendary. So what I mean by that is, I know a lot of you enjoy your god mage compositions, but this is a level 9/10 composition I'm thinking of right now. The one that runs Elder Titan and Zeus in particular. So this comp is, again, as I'm assuming that you're hitting the units, that's most of the difficulty out of the way, but the composition itself is extremely strong, consistent, reliable damage, and even CC if you place a Medusa or Tidehunter or Disruptor in on the side, as well as Elder Titan. And in terms of item dependency, since you're outputting so much damage, maybe not so much. I'd say moderate item, I'd say moderate, but not heavy, if you know what I mean. So, as it's a strong composition, utilizes legendaries, late game composition. I believe it deserves a position in A+ personally. As strength wise, if you see someone hit this comp, they're top 2. Only problem is usually there's better compositions to go if these gods are in play, like god dragons, for Shaman, any other variants usually do a bit better, but in a few rare situations it's needed. 4 god 6 mage with legendaries does an extremely good job. Alright, next up we have Foregone with legendary. So Foregone, you're all away, you get the 4 bugs. Extremely powerful synergy with legendaries. Frontline your units with seeds with high level reference seeds in the back. When they die, they'll spawn 3-star Kia seeds guaranteed. And overall, this is an extremely powerful top 2 composition when people hit it. So by legendaries, I think the ones that you're thinking of are like Warlock and TA2 in particular. TA2 has your hyper carry 3 assassin bonus in the backline, doing tons and tons of damage with its refraction, and Warlock on the side providing CC and utility and constant refreshes with golem spawns. Extremely powerful. Level 10 composition, typically. And honestly, not that item reliant to get top 1 due to how strong the base units are in particular. When you spawn things like Brood 3, Sand King 3, which allow your placed units to also spawn more 3-star units, you have a constant cycle of extremely strong units flooding enemy walls with 30 damage plus, and eventually, most likely, winning the game as long as something like 6 Warlock isn't in play. So Foregone legendary, top 1, top 2 composition. If you hit this, definitely S tier. Alright, next up, we have 4 IKEA Mythic. So by Mythic, I mean your 4 cost pieces that form the bulk of your composition. So instead of like TA and Warlock, maybe you got a bit desperate mid game, you're stuck at level 8, you have to roll down your money, and you're stuck with Pangolias and Necrophoses as your seeds and parents for your composition. Unfortunately, this composition is no good compared to its legendary counterpart. Most of the time, you won't have guaranteed 3-star spawns, resulting in absolutely mediocre core and bulk of CC and units. And in order for Pangolia to do work, it is extremely item reliant to kill other units, other compositions I mean. That being said, in terms of how often I see it top 4, honestly quite rarely, unless they had an extremely healthy early game. Most of the time when I see mythic versions of Foregone, it's honestly no good. It rarely top 4s. Only if you're really lucky, maybe you'll get top 3, top 2, but you really need to pivot to a legendary variant if you're playing Mythic. So that being said, Mythic by itself, I'd say about a B+. Next up we got Foregone 2 Ogre. So we got our boy, or what I like to call the Omega Alch composition. So you run Foregone as usual, you have Alchemist as your hyper carry, preferably in like the bottom left corner, bottom right, whatever works for you. And as your melee units die in the front line, Alchemist's Ogre bonus kicks in, does 200% more health, has 200% more damage, and eventually becomes a huge hyper carry himself, cleaving through enemy units. So, extremely good in theory, yes, but in my opinion, it is quite item reliant to make sure that Alchemist has enough damage output and is able to utilize his health, the increased health from Ogre bonus, successfully and efficiently. So, without any damage items, sure when he ults he has good base damage, but a lot of the time, he'll be the last unit left, and he really needs damage to get through 9+ units, usually. This is what usually happens in most cases. For Alchemist 2 in particular. I'm saying Alchemist 2 because, hitting Alchemist 3 is a bit unreliable, but Alchemist 2, Omega Alch variant, if you have decent items, gets through a lot of other meta compositions like Mages, Meepo, Kia, and whatnot. But the reason why I won't place it as high as those other meta compositions is because it's extremely reliant on hitting alchemists and items, and you kind of peak at alchemist too, whereas everyone else kind of scales a little past you with 3-star units. But that being said, it's still quite powerful and worth vying for if you find alchemists in your mid to late game. So in my opinion, I place him around A-. A- for now. Alright, next up, we got 6 warriors. So I have a bit of mixed feelings about 6 warriors. So typically what you'll do is you'll stay level 6, reroll your warriors, ideally have Slaughter 3, Tusk 3, Axe 3, Lycan 3, you know the deal. You'll have 5 to 6 3-star chunky warriors. So ideally you want these around early round 20s, like 20, 21, 22. Around there's a nice little spot to give you a good pacing, but the issue I have with warriors is that past round 30, if there's about 3, 4 other people alive, chances are you're going to be the one dying first, as everyone else will most likely have already outscaled you, as you're just the warriors compared to whatever else is out there. For instance, 9 hunters will knock you back, 4 Akia legendaries will just essentially outmuscle you itself with constant Akia spawns. What else is there? 5 Dragonfl gods will CC you to death with magic damage and crowd control. So that being said, I'd say overall, mid game, fairly strong, but post 30 it does fall off a little too hard. On the plus side though, I wouldn't say it's too item reliant. I'd say it's moderate item reliance onto your Slider or Tusk to kill units, but outside of that, I'd say it's a solid composition. Not great, not terrible, about in the middle, so I think it deserves a spot in A-. Alright, next up, we have 6 assassins, like a raw 6 assassins with Slark. So I'm thinking, this is the type of composition that spikes at level 7, you have Tiny 3, and 6 other assassins where Slark is your main hyper carry. So in my personal opinion, while this comp isn't played that much, I actually think it's quite powerful itself as a replacement for the old 9 assassin wizard variant. The reason behind that is, as in the most recent patch, the 6 assassin bonus itself got buffed, while the 9 assassin buff got nerfed, meaning that the incentive to actually go for the wizard variant has been decreased, and has increased the 6 assassin variant. So what ends up happening is that these 6 assassins, they actually do quite similar damage to the 9 assassin variant, but with the added benefit of not being restricted by wizards. So wizards themselves, pretty mediocre units, maybe even below average. And not only that, you can't tack any other synergies on, but with Assassin Slark, really strong mid-game composition, will survive to top 4, and not only that, you can add on things like Beast bonus, Naga bonus, things you couldn't do with previous Wizard bonus with similar damage output. So, in my opinion, I think it's a really strong composition right now, even though it's quite underplayed. Look out for this one. If you pick up Slark's, Bounties, and Spirit Breakers early game, try 6 Assassin with Slark as your hyper carry. I recommend it. I reckon you'll have a good time in the top 4, so that being said, I think it deserves a nice little spot in A. As you know, assassins tend to fall off late game, as they do, as their main job is just to get you in top 4, but yes, very good. Alrighty, so next up, we have 6 assassin, but a faceless variant. So this is actually shaping up to be one of my favourite compositions this meta as well, and not only that, I've almost seen this composition every game recently in my coin lobbies. Reason behind that being is because, well, the composition's just that strong right now. I see it top 1, top 2, top 3, top 4 very, very consistently when you hit a faceless 3-star. What's the downside though? As it's assassins, it is item reliant, of course, so you really want to be fishing for Weaponsmith and Captain Greenskin's treasures. So, one more thing I can add on to the synergy. So typically you run 2 Akia assassins in it, so Sand King and Nyx Assassin. So past level 7 and 8, past level 6 I mean. what you'll want to do is pull Faceless 3 back onto your bench and roll for a 1-star variant, so it can play a role as an Akia seed and spawn 3-star Akias to just give your comp a bit more frontline and longevity. But the unit itself, so why Faceless 3 as your main hyper carry? Well, just recently, again, he got a slight buff with his time stop passive, 5 to 7% chance to CC on auto attack, and not only that, the reason why it works well with 6 assassins, as again, 6 assassin bonus got buffed, 30% chance to do 400% damage, extremely huge. And when it's in Chronosphere with weaponsmith tier items, he can easily kill 2 to 3 units for free while everyone else is CC. Obviously there's the downside of Faceless, sometimes he's on your team, sometimes on theirs, but overall, the work he gets done in the Chronosphere with really good items, and just being a really bulky and high stat unit itself, ends up leading it to consistently top 3 with decent items and unit rolls. So in my opinion, as it has win potential, doesn't actually fall off too much late game, spikes mid game as well. I actually kind of want to place it in A+ personally. I think it's an extremely good composition. So ideally you want to be level 6 and reroll hard and hit those units in particular. Alright, next up, 5 Dragonfl got S tier. Do I even need to explain it? Literally the best composition in the game right now. Not item reliant. It doesn't even matter what items you get. You can place it on the Dragon Knight if it's damage, Zeus if it's magic, Tidehunter if it's defensive. Like, any items go everywhere and work perfectly for this composition. And not only that, extremely high damage output with the initial 5 dragon and god cycling to them. Let me rephrase that. Constant CC from god bonus, constant damage from god bonus, and the fact that it has 5 dragons attached on as well means it'll always get the first hit and be able to CC and kill units before they can retaliate. And it does that on repeat over and over and over again. I mean, what else can I say? Extremely strong. Obviously the hard part is getting to level 10 and hitting all your units, but again, in this tier list I'm kind of assuming you've already hit the units. That doesn't play a factor in strength. Just the raw composition itself, extremely strong. S tier, no arguing about it. Alright, next up, Night Assassin Wizards. So, as the Night Assassin bonus got nerfed, there is no damage bonus to having Night Assassins anymore. The only thing it offers is a backstab bleed, which is good in itself, but the downside is you have to run Wizards, and you can't attack on any other synergy, so you can't add Naga if you're versing mages, can't attack on Beasts for more damage, can't add a Earthshaker for a Taunt Totem, you know what I mean. And as it got nerfed and there's better versions of itself in terms of 6 Assassin and Faceless versions, I'd say it places below both of them. But it's still decent in today's meta. Like, it can still top 4 you if you hit the weapons, but again, as it's assassins, it's item reliant, but it can still top 4 you. But obviously below the other 2 assassin variants, so I place it in A- personally. Alrighty, next up, we have 6 Hunter, 2 Orc. So I had a long think about this one, because as you all know, if you watch my stream, you know I love this. I love Hunters so much. They're just extremely easy to play, reliable. It gets you to top 4, but they have a reliance on a specific item called a telescope for the 2 dwarf bonus. You don't hit that telescope, you're bottom 4. There's no question about it. But you hit that telescope, oh, I think you have a nice easy sail into top 4. But yes, after having a think about it, that's a huge negative to me. To have a composition limited on whether you hit an item or not is an extremely large downside in my opinion. So while it can be extremely strong, powers through rounds 20 to 25, it does also actually tend to fall off post 25 even with Telescope if you have no 3-star units, as Ikea bonus in general typically counters hunters with their focus fire and basic auto attacks getting CC'd through Broodmother Web, Nick's Assassin's done, you know, so on and so forth. Also loses to Meepo Akir, which you see every game. And not only that, Mage compositions, if not positioned properly, can blast you away. But overall, I give it a B+. Obviously, if you hit the telescope, add 2 tiers onto it. You don't hit it, take 2 tiers away, you get 8th place. So, the reason it's being held back is due to telescope being harder to find and its item reliance on hitting that telescope, obviously, as well as decent items on top of that. Alrighty, next up, 9 Hunters. Oh. In a complete separate light to 6 Hunters, I think 9 Hunters is extremely powerful for obvious reasons. Obviously, you got to be level 9. You have to hit Tide Hunter as one of your hunters, and not only that, it has that knockback potential and increases damage to all of your assassins. And by the point you hit 9 Hunters, I'm kind of assuming you've already hit your telescope because, well, you're level 9, right? You're level 9-10 with Hunters. You would have had to have had telescope early game to get you into that position in the first place. So, not only that, 9 Hunters itself, extremely powerful composition. It even has a chance to win against Akir, or yeah, I'd say it has a decent fight, and obviously, it's not the favourite, but decent fight against its main counter Akir. Actually has a good chance against Dragon Gods, if you position properly, with 3-star units, maybe even a mechanism to refresh health. It has extremely high damage and knockbacks, essentially adding CC to every single unit of yours. Extremely powerful, works. Actually ends up countering Hunter's natural counter, which is Assassins with knockback, if you corner position properly. Beats most late game compositions, add mid game compositions, but in the end, I'd say it deserves a spot in the top of A+. I believe the top of A+ is a good spot. Honestly, almost S tier. I'm a bit conflicted between S tier and A+ for Hunters actually, because it's extremely strong. Even now, I'm still rethinking it. I'm actually tempted to put it into S tier for now, given how strong it is late game. And how many different compositions it beats. Alright, next up, we have 9 Assassin Legion Commander. Alright, so this composition, also one of my favourites, but unfortunately, with the recent patches, it has fallen off in terms of relevancy. Extremely item reliant. You need to also set up your Legion Commander early game to build stacks on it to get it to the stage where it can one-hit units. There's just too many loopholes you got to get through to make it work. But that being said, when it's online, if you can one-hit units jump, one-hit jump, oh man, you're gonna have an amazing time. It's also really fun to watch your assassins just 1v20 like Meepo or Kia lineups or anything in particular like that. But the problem is extremely high variance composition. Can top 2 comfortably, or it can also bottom 2 if you don't have your Legion Commander set up with stacks or miss items. So that being said, I think just because if you hit Legion 3, and I'm assuming you do, it's already a strong enough composition. I'd say it belongs in A-, right in the middle. Because when you do hit it, it's extremely strong, but when you go for it and miss items, it's terrible. And don't have stacks, it's terrible. It doesn't one hit, does nothing, and you lose. So I place it A- for now. And next up we've got 6 Troll Legion. Unfortunately, also used to be one of my favourites, but they just nerfed the living hell out of the 6 Troll bonus. They essentially, yeah, I think they're half the effectiveness of 6 Troll, meaning the damage output is just so minimal compared to the Assassin variant, and it in itself quite squishy and vulnerable to CC, very item reliant, generally doesn't even beat anything late game anymore due to its nerfs, and anyway, even if you do play 6 Troll early game, you pivot to Assassins. So that being said, I think it's not worth going for anymore. It's a CT composition, don't do it. Only go 6 trolls, maybe early mid game to build up stacks, and then pivot to assassins. Don't play it late game. Terrible. No good. Alrighty. Next up, we got 6 knights with Legion as your main carry. So I've been having to do a bit of a think, doing some research, trying it out myself. But I think 6 knights with Legion 3 is actually a really solid composition right now. Legion 3 with a new knight, with a triple knight shield with additional armor from the most recent patch. So knights actually got buffed recently for 6 knight bonus, 4 knight bonus, and 2 knight bonus. And Legion itself extremely durable, very strong unit. When placed in a 6 knight variant, extremely tanky, very hard to kill. Only problem is, to make the Legion really pop off, again, you need Weaponsmith, you need items to make sure it can cleave through enemy compositions. So that being said, has an extremely strong core, a little item dependent to make sure Legion carry can kill things, but again, I'm assuming you hit 3-star of most of your knights, pretty much all of them except Dragon Knight. That being said, extremely strong, works very well against the 9 mage meta right now, works against a lot of other compositions in particular. Very rarely played, but when it does get played, I see it top 3 quite frequently, so in my opinion, I believe it deserves a spot in A. A is a good spot for it. Alright, next up we got 4 Knight, 2 Troll, 2 Undead. So the type of knight gameplay I'm thinking of here is the reroll variant, where maybe you open level 4, dismiss goblins, dismiss orcs, whatever has less legendaries in the pool, and roll your heart out for 3-star Luna, CK, Abaddon, and Batrider. So I have a lot of issues with this composition, personally, because if your Luna 3 does not have items, it is worthless. It gets rolled by Akia in general as well, and with Meepo keeping one of the most popular units, that's not what you want to see. It also kind of struggles with killing single units in particular, unless your Luna obviously has great items, because knights themselves kind of lack single target damage. I mean, as your main carry is a Luna, right? Which specializes in doing damage to multiple units at the same time. No real spells to target singular units, maybe except for CK, but it's just a random stun, not reliable. That being said, when you do hit the core, it's quite durable and bulky, but without Luna killing their enemy composition with Weaponsmith tier items, it is horrendous. And due to its item reliance, I think it deserves to get B+. Because if you do hit the items, it's actually quite solid, but outside of that, it's rubbish. Alright, next up, I had to sigh when I saw this one, sorry. So 4 God, 4 Knight. So what I mean by 4 God, 4 Knight is the variant of Knight composition where you have Batrider 3 as your main carry. Where maybe he has Blink Dagger, Arcane Boots, blinks in the back, gets an instant Flame Path, or I forgot what it was called, you know what I'm talking about. He goes back and forth across the whole chessboard, lighting it all up. When you do hit the items and the units, it is fun, it is powerful, but it is extremely reliant on items and does kind of fall off late game against any compositions that have single target hyper carries such as Faceless Void, Terrorblade 3, you know what I mean. It has trouble killing single units, as the main appeal of it is to do AoE with Batrider's ability. That being said, it does do well against a lot of meta compositions that, such as Akia and Mages, as Knight bonus itself does really well against Mages with the initial Magic Resist reduction. Magic Resist. But it is really item reliant. You need Mystic Staves early game, you need an energy booster, you need a Blink Dagger, you need a Dagon. The problem is that there's just too many items it needs to really work. So that being said, I think it deserves B tier. I mean, it's fine, if you find the items, go for it. You'll have a good time when it pops off, but when you don't, you just get 8th place. And when I get 8th place, I get salty, so it's a B tier comp for me. B tier, it's about the bottom of what you want to be playing right now in the meta. But it does work. It does work. Alright, next up, Foregone Morphlings. I think it's just the worst version of that rider, honestly. Very item reliant for your Morphling. Pretty mediocre damage now. I mean, in the past, Foregone Morphling used to be extremely powerful. But due to multiple nerfs, I believe they've almost reduced the damage by half compared to what it used to do. Unless you go Warlock bonus in particular instead of Assassins, it's going to have no sustain on its waveform. It doesn't really fare that well late game, because a lot of compositions might just end up running a Doom with a Blink Dagger. Doom Blink Daggers, turns off your Morphling, that's it, game over for you, right? So it does have a single point of failure, very item reliant to make sure it works, falls off late game. Not really ideal gameplay or composition you want to be going for, so I'm going to have to slot that one in C tier. Alright, so next up, we got 6 Goblin reroll. So this specific version of Goblins involves hitting Timber 3, Tinker 3, Clock 3, rerolling early game, and then later on, I guess mid game, hitting level 7, putting Alchemist and 2 Wizards in for the final 6 Goblin bonus power spike. So, what do I think of this composition in particular in terms of strength? I think earlier mid game, when you actually hit the 3-star units, it actually spikes quite well and beats out a lot of other mid-game compositions just purely based on its brute unit quality and 6 Goblin bonus power spike. It actually works really well, but the problem is it does kind of get outscaled late game if you are missing legendaries such as like Snapfire, Techies and Gyrocopter. And I guess the plus side to it is that it's actually not too item reliant, as you're using the Goblin bonus for tankiness. These units themselves have quite decent health pools and armor and have good abilities for damage. So for instance, Timbersaw has a nice pure damage Buzzsaw, Tinker has a nice single target or slightly random but good magic damage output, so does Bounty Hunter. Clock has nice duelist potential. So overall, I'd say it's about a nice B+, because unfortunately its late game is kind of not good with just the raw 6 Goblins themselves, as it falls off against many of the other late game compositions. It does struggle a little bit in terms of killing single target hypercarry units like a TB3 with BKB, Slark 3 Mega Assassin just cleaving through all the backline. So that being said, I'd say it's a solid B+. It's definitely playable, it can get you top 4, but in terms of winning the game and top 2ing, it's quite difficult to get that far. Alright, so B+. So next up we got 5 Dragons. Alright, so 5 Dragons, legendary composition, you're probably level 10, straight to S tier. No doubt about it, 5 Dragons is extremely powerful with its initial burst. The upside to the Fall God variant is that the initial 5 Dragon burst is way more powerful, as you can put up to 5 extra units in, or even 6 or 7 if you get to level 11 or 12. And if your units are high quality enough, you can literally just one-shot the enemy composition. If you have like a Techies 2, Tide 2, Disrupted 2, you know what I mean. Enough CC and damage to kill the enemy before they can strike back, that is S tier material right there. And not only that, but as this composition is ability based, and that the units within them already have a high enough base damage to one-shot the enemy, it actually isn't that item reliant. So with the result of being able to one-shot enemies without counterattack and not being too item reliant, that is just straight up S tier material. 5 Dragons, straight to S, no questions asked. Done. Alright, next up, Gamble C. This sort of playstyle is just absolutely horrendous. You literally rely on RNG, on RNG, on RNG. I don't care what you say. Gamble, you might as well go play a slot machine, honestly. So first up, you need to find Sniper and Gyro. No, Sniper Gyro. You need to find a Gyro through Panda and Sniper composition early game. Then you have to hit a 5% chance to drop the gyro. And then you need to make sure you have the mechs to get the 3 mech bonus online. And then you have to actually have strong enough mechs and items to win rounds with your 3 mech 3 wizard. And then when you get your golden heart of the machine, then you have to hope you hit the right legendaries. You can't just get Jakiros and other rubbish like that. You need gyrocopters and techies in particular to get your composition online to farm more legendaries. Just that whole spiel I just went through right there. There's just so much randomness. It's just not worth it. Do it if you want to just have fun in a one-off game, maybe flex some 3-star legendaries on the, like, I don't know, 10% chance you hit it after the gyro, but it is a horrendous strategy. You will most likely bottom 4, do it for fun. But honestly, it is pretty fun. If you do hit the mechs, and you do get the legendaries and you get guaranteed first, it's a good time. But I just think it's an absolute poor mechanic to have a 5% chance to just steamroll games with your gyrocopter. But yeah, it's in the game. What can you do? That's life. Play around it. I mean, it's C tier for a reason. Don't play it. But when you do play it, go ham. It's something to remember, I guess. It's good fun. At the end of the day, I'm just being a salty person, but it's good fun. Give it at least one try, you know? Give it at least a try. Alright, next up, 6 Beasts. 6 Beasts about, I'd say 3 patches ago. Quite prominent, but now it just got nerfed a bit too much. Doesn't really have late game. I guess early mid game, nice power spike if you somehow hit the early Pangoli and get 6 beasts in. But late game, you kind of just die to everything else, right? You're not really strong enough to kill everyone because the 6 beasts bonus got nerfed. Your units are mostly quite glass cannony as their base for offensive damage, resulting in you most likely dying to spell damage or anything, or pretty much every other composition that's more powerful than you. And overall, C tier. Not that great. Don't go it. Maybe just go it if you want to have a bit of fun, but I do not recommend it. Anyway, next up, 4 Shaman, 4 Thorin. Actually, another very fun composition of mine. And that being said, when you do hit this composition at your level 9/10 power spike, is extremely powerful. Even though there's some randomness in the Shaman bonus, maybe a Disruptor 2 will turn into like a Chikiro 3, maybe it'll be a Techie 3. Either way, there is quite a lot of variance in its usefulness depending on what your Shamans are, but the fact that you get significantly stronger units for your Shamans makes it worth putting in, and on top of that, the 3 Tauren bonus for the triple totems for damage and extra utility, extremely powerful ability, very good support and CC. So not only is it an extremely strong composition itself, has a nice Shaman core with Tauren totems to CC and provide damage, it's also not that item reliant, giving it extra consistency when you hit the unit. So I think overall it's an S tier quality composition to me. The only main downside is that the units you use for 4 Shaman and 4 Tauren kind of mostly overlap with 5 Dragon 4 Gods, and I think you'd rather just go Dragon Gods as the stronger composition. So things like Elder Titan and Disruptor 2, and even like whatever extra legendaries you decide to put in, you could literally just go Dragon Gods and probably have a stronger composition. That's why it's probably not as highly rated as that, but that being said, the comp itself compared to everything else, S tier goodness. Can't complain. Alright, 6 Warlock, 2 Monk. Oh, you've all seen it. This is absolute fantastic composition. You'll love to see it. S tier. It's just so powerful, right? It's your Monkey King. 2 Monk bonus, 6 Warlock, so when it kills a unit, it gets more health back. When it deflects damage, it gets its health back. Against anything physical damage based or Akia, you just win. It's a hard counter to anything Akia or physical damage based, which is what essentially most of the meta is made up of, apart from the Mage part of it. But anything that doesn't quite counter 6 Warlock 2 Monk just gets completely rolled by it, has no chance of coming back. Now onto items, how reliant is it? I'd say it has some semblance of item reliance in terms of getting tankiness onto your Monkey King too, to make sure it doesn't die in one shot. But outside of that, it's not too bad, because even a bad Monkey King 2 can tank quite a lot of damage and fulfill its role as an invincible carry bruiser that could just essentially 1v20 Ikea boards. The composition itself is amazing, just doesn't seem to lose to anything that doesn't counter it. What's the downside? You can get one shot by mage compositions. You usually don't stand much of a chance against dragon gods unless your Monkey King has like a blink dagger and a BKB. So outside of that, extremely solid composition, level 10 power spike. When you see someone hit this, they're probably going to get top 1 unless someone directly counters it with a mage or dragon composition. So yep, S tier, no complaints about it. Alrighty, so next up we got 6 Warlock, 4 God, so a bit of a niche composition. I wasn't sure to add it in or not as it's quite rare to see, so instead of putting in Monkey King and Warlock, instead of Monkey King and Pandaren for 2 Monk, you place in your 4 God bonus, have 5 Warlocks as there's a 2 Wizard bonus from placing in your 4 Gods. And then as your final unit, you can run like say a Disruptor, oh no, not Disruptor, you run TA2 to constantly have her ability Refraction off, extremely low cooldown, constant shields and huge damage in the backline. Works quite similar to 6 Warlock 2 Monk in that whenever you kill units, you pretty much generate more health for your overall composition. The 6 Warlocks themselves can do quite a lot of work by themselves, especially if you have the Orc Warlock and Enigma as 2 of your main Warlocks benefiting off the God bonus. That's extremely huge for CC and damage purposes. Very strong composition overall if you hit it. Kind of item reliant though, because as it's a raw God composition, you do need mana items to get the ball rolling a bit quicker compared to mage compositions which have a Crystal Maiden, perhaps, dragon gods that instantly attack you back, maybe even assassins that get in your backline instantly and roll your backline before they cast. So I'd say it does have item reliance, but that being said, very strong composition if you do hit it in the right situation and have the right units for it and items. Extremely powerful. I'd probably go ahead and give that an A+ actually, given how high quality the units are and how good the synergy is. Very good overall, very good, but again, as a late game composition, it can fall off against the other big ones, but against everything else, I'll probably just stomp Akira and everything else below. Alright, on to the next one, 9 Mage, 4 Wizard. Now, this composition is an absolute staple in the meta right now, as TL1 boxes from rounds 1, 2, 3 now can provide you with Mystic Staves and Energy Boosters. 9 Mages come back into the meta, stronger than ever. So, if you're early game getting round 1, 2, 3 boxes, you find Mystic Staves and Energy Boosters, it's actually quite worth it to force 9 Mages. Hopefully you get 3 humans, get to level 8, perhaps pick up an Elite Recruiter Relic at round 20, and you'll have an absolute beast of a composition with Keeper of the Light 2 one-shotting units in the backline. So, due to the availability of more mage items and being able to easily make, Scythe of the Vice itself is a bit easier to make as well, as crowns can break down into void stones. 9 Mage is extremely powerful, extremely huge burst, pretty good quality units. You don't need to go for 3 stars, 2 stars are good enough, the downside being you need higher levels. And obviously, after all this talking about items, it is also its downside. Items are extremely important in 9 Mage. If you don't have arcane boosters, dagons, anything of the sort to get your Keeper of Light to shoot faster, you'll essentially lose against other mages, other compositions that might survive your initial burst and fight back. As the appeal of 9 Mage is that you get a fat initial burst off, CC your enemy, enough so you get another burst off, but without magic damage items and anything to generate mana quickly enough, you'll find yourself struggling and falling off extremely quick. But outside of that, 9 mages are having an absolute field day in Dota chess this season. So, as expected, I think we're going to slot this bad boy right up in A+, just for how consistent it is in terms of unit quality, relic support, and Mystic Staves being much more accessible than before. Very solid composition. Alright. Next up we have another mage variant, which is 6 mage, 4 elemental. Quite an old school build, this one. So you essentially run 5 wizards. No. You run 5 mages, 3 wizards. No. 5 mages, 3 elementals, and 2 wizards as your final level 9 composition, where the 4 elemental bonus will mean that any auto attacks against your composition will cause melee attackers to freeze. So I don't think it's quite as strong as 9 mage, as it's a more niche composition. Only specifically works against melee units, whereas the issue with that is that there is a lot of range units in today's meta. If you just look at S and A+ tier, Dragon Gods, Meepo or Kia, I guess the Meepos are melee. There is Assassins, it does work well against Assassins, but then there's Hunters, Mages, right? So I guess situationally it's quite powerful. That being said, it's still strong itself, but I think a lot of the time you're much safer just going 9 mage 4 wizard, but maybe if it gets, let's say, Monkey King for instance, or elemental bonus is quite nice if you just place a tiny in front of them, or even Enigma or Razor, up to you. But I think it's still a viable composition in meta, you can definitely top 3 with it. So that being said, I think I put it in a nice little A tier position. Alright, next up, 9 Elf 4 Wizards. So 9 Elf 4 Wizards. Had a few mixed feelings about this one. I've had some success, I've had some failures. But overall, my thought on the composition is that, yes, it has an extremely powerful mid-game power spike from round 20 to 25. Added bonus of just doing 20 damage to your opponent, so if they're trying to scale, you'll just stop them in their tracks if they run into you. But, post round 30, you're gonna fall off way harder than almost any other composition. Because past round 30 is when big AoE compositions start coming online, fat assassins get all their items, and chances are your 9 elf probably won't have enough utility, damage, and CC to deal with anything late game oriented. As it's a bunch of, I guess, medium or mediocre to above average quality units that don't quite seal the deal, if you know what I mean. It's based off tankiness, it doesn't quite kill enemies late game, but mid game you're going to have an absolute field day, and if you play it well, you do have a good chance of just killing everyone else and just gliding your way into top 4 in an aggressive lobby, but outside of that, you're going to struggle. And in terms of item dependence, it's not too item reliant, I guess, in most cases, but there is some reliance on getting your tree 3 magic resistance in the form of cloak and BKB as a priority. But that being said, just normal regen and armor items work fine as well. Obviously, you're going to struggle against mage regardless late game anyway, but having cloaks are nice. And overall, I'd say it's solid in general, although it does struggle a lot. The fall off is huge late game. But that being said, it does a pretty solid job at getting to the top 4 in aggressive lobbies. So that being said, I think I'm going to place this bad boy right in A-, not right in the middle of the meta. I think it's decent, not great, I wouldn't force it, but if you get given the units, go for it. Alrighty, on to 6 Orc 4 Wizards. So about maybe 2 patches ago, literally everyone played this composition. The tankiness you got from having low courier health translated to about, I don't know, I think it was roughly like almost 1500 health on all your units. Ridiculously busted, but then, as you'd expect a proper developer to do, they reverted that strength. It's been nerfed twice now, to the point that almost no one plays it anymore as a standalone composition. The only time it's really viable is if the Orc, Warlock, and Disruptor in the game, and you can slide them into your 6 orc composition, but outside of that, it's extremely poor now. The health nerfs are a bit too much in my opinion. 6 orc it really does struggle to get you to top 4 now. That being said, I'm going to put this bad boy in B, because if you do hit legendaries and solid items, you might get to top 4, but against hyper carry based compositions, you're just not going to have a fun time. Like, how does 6 orc kill a TB3 with all its damage items, right? It just doesn't. But I guess, actually, that being said, I guess it's not that reliant on items, but overall the composition's a bit too weak compared to everything above it, so I think B is where it sits. Alright, but heading on to 6 orc on the other hand. So if you actually have your Axe, Juggernaut, Beastmaster, Chen, Disruptor, and Warlock all in your lineup as your 6 orc core, it's a completely different story, as in this case you can start tacking on all these other synergies and not being restricted by the 4 wizard bonus. Now you can have Warlock, now you can have Naga, now you can have anything else and not worry about that. And in this case, 6 orc is actually quite powerful in my opinion. When you run things like Warlock, Disruptor, Husker, with additional things like Warrior bonus, Naga, it actually becomes an extremely bulky and tanky, hard-hitting composition. It's surprisingly powerful. Obviously it's a little hard to put together, as you're going to have to hold your 2-star orcs the whole game, then bank on hitting legendary rolls in Disruptor and Warlock. But again, this tier list is about compositions that have already hit their unit, so we're factoring that out. But the composition itself actually does really well against Akia in general, I find, because Disruptor has nice AoE, Warlock plays off constantly dying units pretty well, so 6 orc itself, the raw version, when you hit the units, also on top of that, not even that item reliant, it's just strong. It's actually quite strong overall. I think, in my opinion, you can slide this actually up into A+, personally. I think 6 orc by itself, if you hit the right legendaries, the right units, all together, it's actually really powerful compared to its wizard counterpart due to the added synergies you can place on top. As you can say, for instance, with wizards you can't have Warlock and Enigma, but in this case you can, and not only that, you can give all your units Warlock bonus. Actually really powerful in my opinion. This one might be a bit controversial, but again, this tier list is my opinion, and yeah. And as for all the meta compositions I had in mind, this right here is the finished product. I hope you enjoyed my rant about tier lists, compositions, everything, how it works in my opinion. And yeah, that is it from me. As always, if you enjoyed what you watched, make sure to like this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel to be notified of when I post a new video. And head over to my Twitch over at twitch.tv/grackattack_420 to catch me live from Monday to Saturday, 7 PM Australian Eastern Standard Time. Anyways, thanks for watching.